year is 1150. Your crush just asked you to scale a dragon's lair for a single glowing scale, or maybe to challenge the greatest knight in the land to a joust with a poisoned lance. What if your true love demanded you sail to the ends of the known world, facing storms and monsters, just to retrieve a magical jewel? Are you ready to risk everything for love in the medieval age? Number 1. The Quest of the Perfect Knight and a Serpent's Eye. The sun had just begun to peek over the jagged peaks of the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep violet. Sir Gareth, a knight whose valor was as renowned as his courtesy, tightened the straps of his gauntlets. His armor, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected the nascent light, glimmering like a beacon of hope, or perhaps a target. He stood at the edge of the Whispering Woods, a place where few dared to tread, let alone venture deep within. His heart, usually a steady drumbeat of courage, hammered against his ribs with an anxious rhythm, not from fear of the woods themselves, but from the impossible task that lay within. Lady Isolde, whose beauty was said to outshine the morning star, had set the challenge. Her hand, her heart, her very being was the prize. But the price was steep. She demanded the Serpent's Eye, a gem rumored to glow with an inner fire stolen centuries ago from a benevolent wizard by a monstrous ancient serpent that now dwelled deep within the perilous caverns of the Dragon's Tooth. Many knights, emboldened by Isolde's grace and the lure of her affection, had attempted the quest. Their tales, if they returned at all, spoke of despair, of shadows that moved with malicious intent, and the terrifying hiss of the creature that guarded the gem. None had succeeded. Gareth, however, possessed a resolve forged in the fires of countless tournaments and skirmishes. His squire, young Thomas, a lad barely past his 15th summer, clung to his shield, eyes wide with a mix of awe and terror. "Sir Gareth," Thomas whispered, his voice barely a breath, "are you truly set on this? The whispers say no living man has ever returned from the Serpent's lair with his sanity intact." Gareth placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Honor demands it, Thomas, and love above all." He knew the story. He had heard the chilling accounts of knights who vanished without a trace, their horses returning riderless, their armor dented and scarred, but no sign of the valiant souls who wore them. Some spoke of the serpent's breath, a vapor so toxic it could wither flesh and bone in moments. Others whispered of its scales, harder than any steel, deflecting even the mightiest sword strokes. And the tales of its cunning, its ancient intellect, sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. His journey into the Whispering Woods began. The trees, ancient and gnarled, formed a canopy so dense that little light penetrated, creating a perpetual twilight. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Strange sounds echoed through the gloom, the rustling of unseen creatures, the faint, distant howls that were not quite animal, and the unsettling whisper of the wind through the branches, seeming to carry forgotten warnings. Gareth kept his hand on the hilt of his sword, his senses alert, his heart pounding a steady martial beat. The first true test came on the second day. They stumbled upon a chasm, seemingly bottomless, spanned only by a bridge of gnarled, interwoven roots. As Gareth stepped onto it, the roots began to writhe, tightening around his boots, attempting to ensnare him. He drew his sword, a blade known as Truthseeker, and with powerful, precise strokes severed the gripping roots. The bridge groaned a low, guttural sound, as if alive and in pain. Thomas' fear etched on his face, followed close behind, scrambling across the treacherous span. This was no ordinary forest. It was a place imbued with old, dark magic, protecting the creature within. Deeper they ventured, and the forest gave way to rocky, uneven terrain leading towards the Dragon's Tooth Mountains. The air grew colder, and the whispers intensified, seeming to seep into Gareth's very mind, planting seeds of doubt and fear. He saw illusions, fleeting glimpses of Lady Isolde, her face contorted in sorrow, begging him to turn back. He saw his ancestors, their faces stern and disapproving, warning him against such a folly. He pushed past them, his will a shield against the mental assaults. He knew these were the serpent's tricks, a test of his resolve before he even faced the beast. Medieval texts often described such tests as part of a hero's journey, a way for a valiant knight to prove his worth not just with his sword, but with his spirit. The French romance Percival, the story of the Grail, by Chrétien de Troyes, for example, explores the mental and spiritual trials a knight must endure. Days blurred into a cycle of relentless trekking, meager meals and fitful sleep, they finally reached the base of the Dragon's Tooth. The mountain was a fortress of jagged stone, its peaks shrouded in perpetual mist. Colossal cave mouth, shrouded in shadows, yawned before them, exhaling a chill, damp breath that carried a faint metallic tang. This was the Serpent's lair. The entrance was littered with the skeletal remains of past adventurers, knights still encased in their rusted armor, their bones bleached white by time, their weapons shattered and scattered. A grim testament to the Serpent's power, Gareth swallowed, steeling himself. He lit a torch, its flame casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock their intrusion. Inside the cave, the air grew thick with a pungent, musky odor mixed with the metallic scent he had noticed outside. Passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of water and the crunch of their boots on loose rock. Suddenly, a low, guttural hiss echoed through the cavern, vibrating through the very stone beneath their feet. It was close, too close. Gareth raised his shield, Truthseeker held ready. A low rumble began, growing in intensity, and the ground trembled. Stalactites, sharp as daggers, rained down from the ceiling. A shadow, vast and serpentine, stretched across the cavern wall, growing larger, enveloping them. Then it appeared. Not a dragon, as the legends sometimes described, but a colossal serpent, its scales shimmering with a dull, coppery sheen. Its head, the size of a small horse, bore eyes that glowed with an eerie emerald light. The very serpent's eye Isolde sought embedded in its forehead. Its fangs, longer than Gareth's forearm, dripped with a viscous green venom. Creature uncoiled itself from the shadows, its body thick as an ancient oak, easily filling the vast cavern. Its hiss was now a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of the mountain. Despite the primal fear that clawed at his throat, stood firm. Thomas, paralyzed with terror, stumbled back against the cave wall. The serpent struck. Its head lunged forward with astonishing speed, its fangs aiming for Gareth's chest. Gareth reacted with the speed of a seasoned warrior, raising his shield just in time. The impact sent a jarring shockwave up his arm, making his teeth rattle. The shield, made of reinforced oak and steel, held, but the force was immense. The serpent recoiled, its glowing eyes fixed on Gareth. It struck again, this time sweeping its massive tail. Gareth sidestepped, the wind of its passage tearing at his cloak. He knew he could not defeat this beast with brute force alone. Its scales were impenetrable, its strength overwhelming. He needed a weakness, he needed to be clever. He remembered an old tale, a fragment of wisdom passed down by an ancient sage. The greatest strength often harbors the greatest weakness. The serpent's eye, the very object of his quest, pulsed with an inner light. It was a source of power, but perhaps also its vulnerability. The Mabinogion, a collection of medieval Welsh tales, often featured similar mythical beasts and cunning solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. The serpent coiled, preparing another strike. Gareth noticed a momentary flicker in the serpent's glowing eye as it moved, a slight distortion in the light. He feigned an attack, lunging forward with Truthseeker, not at the serpent's head but at its body. The serpent, immense and arrogant, simply swatted him aside with its tail, sending him skidding across the rocky floor. But that was his plan. As the serpent focused on him, its gaze unwavering, Gareth saw his chance. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his ribs, and charged, not at the fangs, not at the massive body, but directly towards the serpent's head, towards the glowing eye. The serpent, surprised by his audacious move, hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all Gareth needed. With a powerful leap, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, Gareth propelled himself upwards. Truth-seeker, imbued with his unwavering will, arced through the air. He didn't aim for the eye itself, but for the very edge of the socket where the gem was embedded, where the bone might be slightly less reinforced, where the pressure of the gem might have created a hairline fracture over centuries. The blade connected with a horrifying crack. The serpent roared a sound that threatened to split the mountain. Its head thrashed violently, slamming Gareth against the cavern wall. He felt a sharp pain, a fleeting moment of unconsciousness. But in his hand, gripped tight, was the serpent's eye, now dislodged, pulsing with a vibrant emerald light. The serpent, blinded and in unimaginable agony, writhed uncontrollably. It slammed its body against the cavern walls, causing the entire lair to shake, threatening to collapse. Boulders rained down, dust filled the air. Gareth, dazed but alive, saw his chance. He grabbed the terrified Thomas, who had huddled in a fetal position against the wall, and yelled, "Run now!" They stumbled out of the collapsing lair, the monstrous roars of the serpent echoing behind them, slowly fading as the cave mouth sealed itself with falling rock. They emerged into the fading daylight, covered in dust and grime, their bodies aching but alive. In Gareth's hand, the serpent's eye gleamed, a testament to his impossible feat. The journey back was a blur of pain and exhaustion, but also of triumph. The whispering woods seemed less menacing. The illusions gone, the path seemed to clear before them. When they finally emerged from the woods and approached the castle of Lady Isolde, the news of their return had already spread like wildfire. A crowd had gathered their faces, a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Lady Isolde stood on the ramparts, her eyes wide as she saw Gareth, disheveled and weary, but holding the luminous gem. He presented it to her, the serpent's eye glowing in his calloused palm. Her gaze, filled with admiration and something more profound, met his. The danger had been immense, the odds insurmountable, but the perfect knight, driven by love and honor, had achieved the impossible. The stories of medieval quests, like those of Sir Lancelot's trials or Sir Gawain's encounters with supernatural beings, always emphasized the immense personal cost of such heroic endeavors. Number 2. The Oathbreaker's redemption for a lost love. Sir Yvain, Knight of the Lion, once a paragon of chivalry and devotion, now knew the bitter taste of regret. His beloved wife, the Lady Isolde, whose grace and wisdom he had sworn to cherish above all, had cast him out, his crime. The gravest one in the lexicon of medieval love. He had broken his sacred promise to return to her within a year. Seduced by the allure of knightly tournaments and the fleeting glory of combat, he had overstayed his leave, forgetting the woman who waited for him. Heartbroken and betrayed, the pain of her rejection was a wound deeper than any sword cut. Laudine's furious words still echoed in his mind. "You are a deceiver. Your promises are as hollow as a winter wind. You have no honor, no love, no worth." She had sent her maid Lune to deliver the devastating message, and Lune, once a staunch ally, had condemned him without mercy. Yvain had fallen into a deep melancholia, losing his mind, wandering the wilderness like a madman, shunning human company. This period of madness, often called fury or melancholy in medieval texts, is a common theme in Arthurian romance. notably in Chrétien de Troyes' own Yvain, the Knight of the Lion, which details the knight's journey. But true love, even when spurned, can ignite a fierce desire for redemption. Yvain, through the kindness of a hermitage and the healing touch of a magical ointment, slowly regained his sanity and his strength. He knew he could not simply return to Laudine and beg forgiveness. He had to prove his worth through deeds, through dangers faced and overcome. Not for glory, but for her, and for the honor he had so carelessly discarded. He would perform a love quest of atonement. His journey began with a simple act of compassion. He stumbled upon a lion battling a fearsome serpent. The lion clearly outmatched. Yvain, despite his own recent trials, felt compelled to intervene. He slew the serpent, saving the noble beast. The lion, in an act of unexpected gratitude, became his loyal companion, a symbol of his newfound humility and courage. This was a crucial turning point, a step towards rebuilding his shattered honor. The bond between man and animal was a revered concept in medieval bestiaries and moralizing tales, symbolizing divine favor or a knight's inherent goodness. His quest for Laudine's forgiveness led him down paths fraught with peril, each trial a test of his changed heart. He did not seek out these dangers, they found him, and he embraced them, seeing each as an opportunity to right his wrongs. His first great trial came in the form of a tyrannical giant named Harpin of the Mountain, who held captive the family of his former ally, Lunette. Harpin was a brutal oppressor, renowned for his immense strength and cruelty, his fortress high on an almost inaccessible peak. Yvain, accompanied by his faithful lion, scaled the treacherous paths leading to Harpin's stronghold. Climb itself was a danger. Loose stones and sheer drops threatening to send them plummeting to their doom. The giant's guards were fierce, but Yvain, fighting with a ferocity born of desperation and a desire for redemption, cut them down. When he finally confronted Harpin, the giant mocked him, towering over him, wielding a massive club. "You seek to challenge me, worm?" Harpin roared, his voice echoing through the mountain pass. "You are but a shadow of the knights I have crushed." Yvain, remembering Laudine's disdain, fought with a renewed purpose. The fight was brutal. Harpin's blows could shatter rock, and Yvain, though agile, was constantly on the defensive. His lion, with incredible speed and ferocity, leaped at Harpin's legs, distracting the giant, allowing Yvain to find an opening. Plunged his sword into Harpin's vulnerable side, ending the giant's reign of terror. Rescuing Lunette's family was a vital step in redeeming himself in the eyes of Laudine's maid, who held significant sway with the lady. This type of rescue narrative was common in chivalric romances, emphasizing the knight's duty to protect the weak and oppressed. Next, Yvain encountered a castle besieged by a powerful enemy. The defenders, two noble sisters, were on the verge of starvation, their supplies cut off. One sister was good and kind, the other selfish and malicious. Yvain, ever the defender of justice, pledged his aid to the noble sister. The siege was relentless. Arrows rained down, siege engines hurled, massive stones and the sounds of battle were constant. Yvain and his lion fought day and night, repelling assaults, raiding enemy camps for food, and inspiring the beleaguered defenders. He faced overwhelming odds, risking his life repeatedly in hand-to-hand combat on the ramparts, against a wave of attackers that seemed endless. Constant vigilance, the lack of sleep, the gnawing hunger, all added to the immense danger. This ordeal lasted for weeks, a test of endurance as much as skill. Chronicles of real sieges, like the Siege of Antioch during the First Crusade, paint a picture of the brutal, drawn-out suffering involved. His ultimate trial came in a legal dispute, a trial by combat, a common medieval practice to settle matters of justice. He was called to champion the cause of the younger, disinherited sister against her elder sibling, who was championed by a powerful, albeit corrupt knight, known as Gawain's brother. Yvain, unknowingly, was fighting against Gawain himself, his former friend and brother-in-arms, who was championing the elder sister's deceitful claim. This was a unique danger. Fighting a friend, a peer, a man of similar honor, without realizing it. The duel was fierce, a testament to both knights' skill. They fought with a shared intensity, each believing in the righteousness of their cause. Swords clashed, shields splintered, and the ground beneath them became soaked with blood. Yvain, in his desperation to prove his worthiness for Laudine, fought with a fury that bordered on recklessness. He suffered grievous wounds, and Gawain, equally determined, pressed his advantage. The danger here was not just physical, but also the agonizing possibility of dishonoring himself further by defeating a noble knight who was unknowingly his friend. Concept of trial by combat was a fundamental aspect of medieval legal systems, seen as God's judgment, as described in texts like the Assizes of Jerusalem. Finally, both knights collapsed from exhaustion and their wounds, neither able to continue. It was only then, as their helmets were removed, that they recognized each other. The shock was palpable. Yvain, in his humility, revealed his identity and the reason for his long absence and his quest for redemption. Gawain, realizing his error, was filled with remorse. The fight, though devastating, had led to a truth, and Yvain's true character, stripped of pride and adorned with humility, shone through. Though his name was still shrouded in anonymity, Yvain had proven himself time and again through his deeds. Word of the Knight of the Lion and his acts of unparalleled chivalry began to spread. Uni, who had witnessed his transformations and witnessed his selfless acts, began to advocate on his behalf. She knew the depths of his remorse, the sincerity of his actions. She orchestrated a cunning plan, ensuring that Laudine, who secretly longed for his return but was bound by her vow, would be forced to seek the aid of the famed anonymous Knight of the Lion for a difficult task. Laudine unknowingly sent for Yvain. He arrived still veiled in his new identity and accomplished the task with his characteristic bravery. As he knelt before her, finally revealing his identity, Laudine's stern exterior crumbled. The years of pain, the bitterness of betrayal, slowly gave way to the overwhelming tide of her love and relief. The tears in her eyes were not of sorrow, but of profound forgiveness. The dangers he had faced, the physical wounds, the mental anguish, had all been for this moment. He had not just won battles, he had won back his honor, and more importantly, his love. This story, rooted in the narratives of Chrétien de Troyes, captures the essence of a knight's quest for redemption, emphasizing that true courage often lies in overcoming one's own flaws. Number 3. The Forbidden Love and the Price of Intellect. The love between Peter Abelard, a brilliant and controversial scholar, and Heloise, his exceptionally intelligent and learned student, was a scandal waiting to explode in the heart of 12th century Paris. Their quest for love was not one of dragons or duels, but of intellect, passion, and defying the rigid social and religious norms of their time. The dangers they faced were subtle, insidious, and ultimately devastatingly real. Their story, largely told through their extensive surviving letters, is a stark reminder that love quests in the medieval period could be profoundly dangerous without a single sword drawn. Abelard, a master logician and theologian, was renowned for his charisma and his groundbreaking, often provocative teachings at the Notre Dame Cathedral School. Students flocked from all over Europe to hear him. Heloise, niece of Fulbert, a canon of Notre Dame, possessed a mind as sharp as Abelard's, a rare intellectual gem in an age when women were largely confined to domestic roles. She devoured philosophy, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew with an insatiable hunger. Her learning was exceptional, attracting Abelard's attention. The danger began with their intellectual connection. Abelard, captivated by her brilliance, persuaded Fulbert to allow him to live in his house ostensibly to tutor Heloise. This was a common arrangement for tutors, but in a society where reputation was everything, especially for a prominent cleric, it was a precarious position. Proximity, the shared intellectual pursuits, and the undeniable chemistry between them quickly blossomed into a passionate, illicit affair. Their love was born in stolen moments, in whispered conversations about philosophy that subtly turned to declarations of affection. This was a dangerous game, for clerical celibacy, though often flouted in practice, was an official church doctrine. Any public exposure of their relationship would be catastrophic for Abelard's burgeoning career and Heloise's future. The love quest for them was to maintain their secret, to navigate the treacherous waters of public perception and the watchful eyes of Fulbert, a man of standing and strict moral code. They were playing with fire, and the stakes were incredibly high. They risked not just social disgrace, but also potential violence, imprisonment, or even execution, especially for Abelard, who was already facing criticism for his theological views. The dangers were woven into the very fabric of their daily existence. In every stolen glance, every shared text, every hushed conversation, Heloise became pregnant. This was the ultimate, undeniable proof of their forbidden love, a physical manifestation of their transgression. For a woman in medieval society, an illegitimate child brought immense shame and social ruin. For a scholar, especially a cleric, it meant the end of his career, his reputation, and his influence. Their love had now created a new, terrifying danger: the exposure of their secret to a judgmental world. Abelard, desperate to protect Heloise and their child, proposed a secret marriage. This was a radical step, for a married cleric would still face severe repercussions. He spirited Heloise away to Brittany, where she gave birth to a son, whom they named Astrolabe. This flight was a perilous journey, a literal escape from the immediate danger of exposure, but it only amplified the underlying tension. Their marriage, however, was kept hidden from Fulbert, who, upon learning of the pregnancy, was enraged. The betrayal of his trust, the dishonor brought upon his family, drove Fulbert to a furious vengeance. He saw their love as a calculated deception, a violation of his hospitality and a direct insult to his honor. This was the most direct and brutal danger they faced. Fulbert plotted his revenge, a common response to perceived dishonor in medieval society, where family honor was paramount and feuds could erupt from such slights as depicted in countless medieval sagas and historical accounts of aristocratic disputes. One night, Fulbert and his kinsmen, armed and masked, broke into Abelard's chambers. They performed a barbaric act of mutilation upon him, castrating him. This horrific act was designed to exact the ultimate revenge, to symbolically unmake the man who had dishonored their family, rendering him unable to repeat his crimes and destroying his career, as castration effectively barred one from holding any clerical office. This was not a metaphorical danger, it was a brutal physical assault, an act of violence that shattered Abelard's life and body. The historical record of this event is clear and harrowing, recounted in Abelard's own autobiography, Historia Calamitatum, the story of my misfortunes. The aftermath was profound. For Abelard, it was a living death, a profound humiliation that ended his worldly ambitions. He felt compelled to enter a monastery, becoming a monk driven by a mixture of shame, spiritual seeking, and practical necessity, as his physical state made a secular life difficult. Heloise, in an act of profound love and sacrifice, chose to follow him into the religious life, becoming a nun at the convent of Argenteuil. She did so, not out of a call to monasticism for its own sake, but to protect Abelard's reputation and to remove herself as a perceived cause of his downfall. She accepted the veil, renouncing the world and their shared love, not because she ceased to love him, but because she loved him so deeply that she would sacrifice her own life and desires for his salvation and peace. This act, too, was a dangerous choice in its own way, a profound renunciation of worldly happiness and freedom, embracing a life of austerity and submission. Their love quest did not end with their separation and monastic vows. It continued in their extensive correspondence, some of the most profound and moving letters from the Middle Ages. These letters are filled with intellectual discourse, theological arguments, and heart-making expressions of their enduring love and pain. In these letters, they risked further public scrutiny, further accusations of impropriety, especially Heloise, who often expressed her human desires and regrets with a frankness that was radical for her time. Their love, though physically severed, survived and transformed, a testament to its enduring power, but also a constant reminder of the terrible price they paid. The danger was not just in their initial forbidden passion, but in the long drawn-out consequence that haunted their entire lives. Their story is a powerful, tragic example of a love that defied its age and paid a brutal cost for it. Number 4. The Bitter Herb and the Sea Journey of Despair. Tale of Tristan and Isolde is not merely a story of forbidden love. It is a grand, sweeping saga of betrayal, misunderstanding, and the relentless pursuit of a love that defied all social and political boundaries. Their love quest was steeped in danger from its very inception, rooted in the treacherous waters of courtly intrigue and the overwhelming power of fate. This story, popularized in various medieval romances across Europe, like those by Berulle and Thomas of Britain, resonates with a raw, tragic intensity. Tristan, a valiant knight and nephew to King Mark of Cornwall, was sent to Ireland to bring back the beautiful Princess Isolde as Mark's bride. This journey itself was fraught with danger. Tristan had already proven his courage by slaying the monstrous Morholt, a knight sent by the Irish king to demand tribute, but he had been wounded by Morholt's poisoned sword, and only Isolde, skilled in healing, had been able to save him, unknowingly forming an initial complex bond. The sea journey back to Cornwall, however, held the greatest, most unforeseen peril. Isolde's mother, a sorceress, had prepared a powerful love potion for Isolde and King Mark to drink on their wedding night. This potion was intended to bind them in an unbreakable bond of love, ensuring peace and prosperity for their kingdoms. This seemingly benevolent act, however, became the catalyst for unimaginable suffering and danger. The potion was entrusted to Brangane, Isolde's loyal maid, with strict instructions. On the voyage, overcome by the heat and thirst, Tristan and Isolde mistakenly drank the potion, believing it to be a simple wine. The moment the bitter liquid touched their lips, their fates were sealed. A love fierce and overwhelming ignited between them. A passion so potent it superseded all loyalty, all duty, all reason. This was the ultimate danger. A love so powerful it forced them to betray the very person they were sworn to serve, King Mark. It was an involuntary quest, driven by an external magical force, yet its consequences were entirely their own burden. They arrived in Cornwall, tormented by their forbidden desire. Isolde married King Mark, but her heart, inextricably bound to Tristan, yearned for him. The lovers were forced into a perilous dance of deceit, risking discovery at every turn. Their love quest became a clandestine operation, a series of dangerous encounters in secret gardens, hidden chambers, and whispered conversations under the cloak of night. Each stolen kiss, each shared glance, was a step closer to exposure and death. Court of King Mark, filled with jealous barons and watchful eyes, became a viper's nest. Spies were everywhere eager to undermine Tristan's position as Mark's favored nephew and to expose the queen's infidelity. The very air they breathed was thick with suspicion. The danger was not just of capture, but of subtle accusations, poisoning of minds, and the constant threat of a trial by ordeal, where God's judgment was sought through dangerous physical tests like holding hot iron. Medieval courts were often centers of intense political maneuvering and gossip, as chronicled in historical accounts of royal houses. One of the most dangerous trials was the hot iron ordeal. Accused of infidelity, Isolde had to swear an oath of innocence and then hold a red-hot iron. The belief was that if she were guilty, her hand would burn, proving her sin. This was a literal trial by fire. Isolde, with Tristan's cunning assistance, devised a plan. Tristan, disguised as a beggar, carried her ashore before the ordeal. When she swore her oath, she declared she had been touched only by King Mark and the beggar who carried her. Since the disguised Tristan was indeed the beggar, her oath technically was true. Her hand miraculously remained unburned. This was a direct example of cunning and intelligence as a weapon against the physical dangers of medieval justice. Despite their cleverness, their secret was eventually revealed. King Mark, heartbroken and enraged by the betrayal, condemned them to death. He intended to burn Isolde at the stake and hang Tristan. Their lives were in imminent peril, the direct consequence of their forbidden love. This was a common punishment for adultery and treason in medieval society, as evidenced by legal codes and historical examples of severe penalties for moral transgressions. Tristan, with a miraculous leap from his execution platform, escaped. Isolde, destined for the pyre, was seized by a group of lepers who ironically were seen as living dead and therefore permitted to take the queen without violating the king's decree. The lepers intended a fate worse than death, a life of degradation and torment. This was a truly horrific danger, a public humiliation and a life of suffering that went beyond mere physical death. Mark, witnessing Isolde's capture by the lepers, relented, allowing Tristan to take her and flee into the wild forest of Morrowa. Here, their love quest took on a new form, a desperate struggle for survival. They lived like outlaws, braving the elements, enduring hunger, cold, and constant fear of discovery. They slept in makeshift shelters, hunted for their food, and relied solely on each other. This was a raw, primal danger, far from the comforts of court, a testament to the length they would go to preserve their forbidden bond. Many medieval romances, such as those about Robin Hood, depict the perils and freedoms of outlaw life in the wilderness. Their love, however, began to wear on them. Constant fear, the hardship, the weight of their betrayal eventually took its toll. Mark, finding them asleep in the forest with a sword between them, a symbol of their supposed chastity, was moved by their apparent suffering and allowed them to return to court, but with a terrible condition. Tristan had to leave Cornwall forever. Tristan wandered, seeking solace in other lands, but his heart remained with Isolde. He even married another Isolde, Isolde of the White Hands, but their marriage remained unconsummated, a bitter echo of his true love. When Tristan was mortally wounded by a poisoned spear in a foreign land, his final desperate wish was for Isolde to come and heal him, as she had done before. He sent a messenger, promising a white sail if she came, a black sail if she did not. The greatest, most devastating danger of all was the deception of his jealous wife, Isolde of the White Hands. Seeing the white sail approaching, signaling Isolde's arrival, she lied to Tristan, telling him the sail was black. Tristan, his heart broken by this final betrayal, gave up his will to live and died. When Isolde arrived moments later, she found him dead and in a profound act of despair lay beside him and died of a broken heart. Their love quest, born of magic and fueled by defiance, ended in tragedy, a testament to the destructive power of a love that defied the very world it existed in. The enduring appeal of their story in the medieval period and beyond speaks to the universal struggle of love against insurmountable odds. Number 5. The Lover's Leap from the Tower of the Stars. In the sun-drenched, yet politically volatile kingdom of Navarre, lived a young knight, Sir Percival, whose devotion to his lady, the Princess Aurelia, was as steadfast as the Pyrenees themselves. Aurelia, however, was betrothed to a powerful, cruel duke from a neighboring kingdom, a strategic alliance forged by her father, King Ferdinand, to prevent war. Percival's love quest was not just to win her heart, which he already possessed, but to save her from a fate worse than death, a life of servitude and misery with a man she detested. This was a love quest, fraught with the dangers of political intrigue, royal wrath, and the dizzying heights of a fortress tower. The Duke was a brute, notorious for his volatile temper and his disregard for human kindness. Stories whispered of his past mistreatment of others, of his cold ambition that overshadowed any semblance of human decency. Aurelia, terrified, had secretly implored Percival to find a way to free her. Their love was a beacon in the darkness, a promise of a different future, but the path to that future was paved with incredible risks. The immediate danger was the sheer impossibility of their situation. Royal betrothals were sacred, binding contracts. To break one meant not just personal dishonor, but a severe political crisis, potentially igniting a brutal war between kingdoms. Percival, though a skilled knight, was not of royal blood, and challenging the king's decree or openly defying a powerful duke was an act of treason. This was not a quest against a mythical beast, but against the unyielding power of state and social hierarchy. Medieval chronicles frequently detail the meticulous arrangements of royal marriages and the severe consequences of their disruption, such as the political ramifications of the annulment of Eleanor of Aquitaine's marriage to Louis VII of France. Their secret meetings, brief and furtive, took place in hidden corners of the castle, in moonlit gardens, or disguised by the bustle of the court. Each encounter was a risk, a dance with discovery. Servants, courtiers, even members of the royal guard could be spies, eager to curry favor by reporting such a scandal. Percival knew that a single wrong move, a misplaced glance, a whispered word heard by the wrong person could lead to his immediate arrest, imprisonment, or even execution. The king's suspicion, though unconfirmed, began to grow. Ferdinand was a shrewd ruler, and he sensed the tension, the unspoken longing between his daughter and his young knight. To prevent any further entanglement, and to ensure the betrothal proceeded smoothly, the king ordered Aurelia to be confined to the highest tower of the castle, the Tower of the Stars, until the duke's arrival. The tower, a formidable structure, was guarded day and night, its entrance heavily secured, its windows narrow and barred. This confinement introduced a new and chilling danger. Aurelia was now a prisoner, and Percival's love quest shifted from secret rendezvous to a daring rescue mission. He had to breach the most secure part of the castle, elude vigilant guards, and somehow convince Aurelia to take an unimaginable risk. Percival began his meticulous planning. He spent weeks observing the guards' routines, studying the layout of the castle walls, and charting the treacherous ascent of the Tower of the Stars. He learned that the only way to reach Aurelia's chamber undetected was to scale the outer wall, using the rough stones and ancient ivy as a precarious ladder, a feat that only a skilled climber and a madman would attempt. This was a physical danger of extreme proportions. A single slip, meaning certain death on the jagged rocks below. Tales of daring escapes and castle infiltrations are common in medieval folklore, and historical accounts of sieges highlighting the architectural challenges. One stormy night, with the wind howling and the rain lashing against the castle walls, Percival put his plan into action. The weather, though dangerous for climbing, offered a cloak of concealment. He moved like a shadow, his heart pounding a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. The ascent was brutal. His fingers, numb with cold, scraped against the rough stone. His muscles screamed with effort. Loose stones tumbled beneath his feet, narrowly missing his head. The height was dizzying, the darkness absolute. He battled against the elements, against exhaustion, against the gnawing fear of falling. He finally reached Aurelia's window, exhausted but triumphant. He whispered her name, and her face, pale with fear and relief, appeared behind the bars. He explained his plan. They would have to descend the tower together, using a rope he had secured. It was an almost suicidal risk, but their only chance. Aurelia, with a courage born of desperation and love, agreed. The descent was even more perilous than the ascent. The rope, slick with rain, swayed violently in the wind. Aurelia, not a climber, relied entirely on Percival's strength and guidance. Her grip was tenuous, her fear palpable. They navigated crumbling ledges, avoided the flickering lamplight of guard patrols below, and fought against the elements that threatened to rip them from their precarious hold. The risk of detection was constant. A single shout from a guard below, a glint of steel, and their quest would end in capture and certain death. They finally reached the ground, soaked and trembling, but free. They immediately fled the castle grounds, disappearing into the dark, storm-swept countryside. Their love quest had just begun. They were now fugitives, hunted by the king's men, branded as traitors. The danger had shifted from the confines of the castle to the vast, unforgiving wilderness. They traveled for days, living on meager rations, constantly looking over their shoulders. They faced the perils of the wild, harsh weather, starvation, and the constant threat of encountering bandits, or worse, the king's patrols. They slept in ditches, under trees, their only shelter the ragged cloaks that covered them. This was a test of endurance, of their will to survive against overwhelming odds. The real dangers of travel in medieval times, with poor roads, lack of inns, and prevalence of robbers, are well documented in historical accounts of merchants and pilgrims. Their ultimate aim was to reach a distant, neutral kingdom known for its leniency towards political refugees. The journey was long and arduous, crossing treacherous mountain passes and dense, trackless forests. They faced moments of despair, of physical collapse, but the thought of their shared future and the deep love that bound them spurred them on. They were nearly caught multiple times. Once, they hid in a farmer's barn, overhearing the king's soldiers describing their appearance, their voices echoing in the thin walls. Another time, they narrowly escaped a patrol by plunging into a freezing river, the icy water threatening to claim them. Constant threat of being hunted, of knowing that every shadow could conceal an enemy, was a psychological danger that wore down their spirits, but never broke them. Finally, after weeks of relentless travel, they crossed the border into the neutral kingdom. They were safe at last. Their love quest, a daring escape from a towering prison, a desperate flight across dangerous lands, had concluded in triumph. They had risked everything, their lives, their honor, their very sanity, for a love that refused to be bound by the dictates of kings or the conventions of their age. Their story became a legend, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest dangers are not mythical creatures, but the very real walls of power, tradition, and the lengths people will go to preserve their freedom and their hearts.